Right, okay, let's get rolling, shall we? Let's get rolling. Future of conversational AI is omni-channel, apparently, Tim, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
It is.
Right, thank you for coming. Let's start with some introductions, Tim. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do at Vonage, and we'll do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll kick off.
Okay, so no songs today, just...
You can do songs. Anything from Michael Jackson's back catalogue is fine with me.
I'm Tim Holvey. I head up the API ecosystem of partners for the Vonage API division, which people also call CPaaS. And as far as omnichannel, yes. Omnichannel is actually one of the things we offer. It's real-time communications that are microservices up in the cloud that you can build products around, or even embed in what I call an anchor application, which could be Salesforce or whatever it is, the main application that you or your company may work in. Am I fading in and out as I move the mic?
Yeah, maybe is it when you move your head,
Okay.
if you also move the mic at the same time, it would be sound.
I'm new at this.
Cool. Taryn.
Is this on?
Is it on? Try again.
Might help if I turn it on.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Hello, I'm Taryn Corbett-Drummond. I'm here with Ericsson Digital Humans. So we are creating a studio and API product that allows you to seamlessly integrate digital humans to your conversational AI to create that empathetic, photorealistic digital interface. So we very strongly believe this could be the future evolution of conversational AI and how you can connect with your customers and have stronger customer relations and engagement.
Hi, everyone. I'm Artie Merritt. I lead the Conversational AI Partnership Initiative at AWS. And prior to this, I was the founder and CEO of an analytics platform for chatbots and voice assistants. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. In terms of the omnichannel, what gets me really excited is the multimodal experiences where they're true multimodal with voice IVR helping guide someone through, say, a web or mobile experience. That's pretty exciting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Frederick. I am managing partner at OneReach.ai. OneReach is the top-ranked conversational AI platform according to Gartner's Critical Capabilities Report, and we power over 1 billion conversations a year. I've been with the firm for about 10 years now, and I'm really fortunate to spend time partnering with technical leadership and CTOs to help define their communication transformation strategies.
Cool, thank you. Cool, so, I mean, in this session today, we've had some very good examples from some incredible brands about how they're using conversational AI to completely transform their contact center. We heard from Frank Schneider from Verint about how a large hotel chain has been doing all kinds of things from hotel room bookings to inquiries and a whole bunch of crazy stuff in chat, in the IVR. We heard from Poly AI and Landry's Golden Nugget Hotels, to the point where the conversation actually for booking a hotel room led to the whole business process needing to be re-architected in order to deliver that conversation. We heard from Core AI and Florida Blue about how they're using a visual IVR, so it's a digital journey accompanied by an IVR, so you can ask any questions about it and stuff like that. So we're seeing some real examples of now, thankfully, the technology being used in real-world scenarios, high volume, complex use cases, delivering real business value, effective customer experience. And so it seems as though we've kind of been trying to get to this point for the last, I don't know, probably for OneReach and for you lot here, it's probably longer than that. But for me, it's like 5 years. Like, when are we going to see real kind of like business value happen? Seems to be happening now. And so are we in a phase when we're talking about the future of conversational AI and what's next for conversational AI? Are we asking that question prematurely because we might not have rinsed the full potential of what it does right now? Or is there anything in particular about the future or what's next for conversational AI that you think is exciting you right now? Maybe Tim, will start with you.
Yeah, sure. So we talk to a lot of different vendors or people that use our APIs to make a lot of these solutions. So are we asking it too early? Not really, because you have to keep the end in mind while you're architecting whatever it is that you're going to deliver now. But the thing that I've noticed is we finally now, today, have the technologies to do all the things we imagined 10 years ago, all the customer journey we've always dreamed of providing, but we never really could, we can now provide with the technologies at hand. It's just a matter of actually implementing them and configuring them correctly. I mean, I'm the biggest critic when it comes to customer service and calling in because I know what's available, and even technologies 15 years old aren't configured properly for the customer journey. So we have to keep in mind, how do we best use these to really accomplish the business goal, which is make a better customer journey and create customer loyalty.
It all comes down to providing a better customer experience, and that's often being available 24/7 on channels that users prefer to interact. Folks often talk about the containment rates and reducing escalations, that kind of thing. You can optimize for 100% containment by just never escalating someone, but that would be a horrible customer experience. I think we're moving past the days of the basic FAQ type chatbots. We're seeing the multimodal experience as mentioned. We're also seeing people incorporate additional AI beyond the NLU, so things for image processing, document recognition. There's a customer that we work with that they have a chatbot for onboarding car insurance in Ireland. Instead of typing your name and address, you can take a photo of the driver's license and it'll extract that information. The other thing you do is if you have an existing policy, take a photo of that policy, it'll extract the relevant information to build a new one. And when they found doing this, it reduced the sign-up process from multiple days to under 3 minutes.
Interesting. Wow. Interesting. So what we're seeing now then is that seemingly, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, maybe you can shed some light on this, is that it used to be that some things were just not right for conversational AI. Some use cases were just not the right fit for conversational AI. Some things were not the right fit for the contact center. Some things were not the right fit for chat. It seems now then what you're suggesting is that through the addition of other things like image recognition and some other complementary technologies, we're maybe getting to a place where we can deliver more end-to-end business processes through a conversational channel, or at least mediated by conversational AI, even the ones that were out of reach before, potentially.
Yeah, maybe the big transition is this over-focus on some of the key capabilities like natural language understanding and speech recognition they're so sexy and they're so fun to learn about, and they demo really, really well. But in production, they leave a lot to be desired. And rather than trying to continue to go down that same path, it seems that the whole industry is really opening the aperture to say, what if we don't have to be a hammer where everything looks like a nail, and instead we can be using some of the different channels and capabilities that people already know how to use. Artie's example is a great one. Computer vision, being able to persist a conversation from one channel to the next, and maybe have that conversation even span multiple days or weeks at a time, really lets you reimagine what that customer journey looks like. And I think what's coming next is we're seeing brands wanting to go from playing defense. What I mean by that is when someone asks, how can I get my new card, or can I change my delivery address, and feeling an obligation to respond to that in a really thoughtful way, to now playing offense and saying, based on these attributes, it seems that you need a new card. Is now a good time to get that taken care of for you? And that really changes the relationship that you have with your brands or with your customers, and puts the brand in the driver's seat to compete on some of these customer experiences that you've mentioned as part of your intro.
So it seems as though being more, so on the offense, are you on about being more proactive? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, proactivity. What are machines good at? They're really great at calculations. And so if there are patterns around what makes somebody more likely to ask a question, rather than focusing on how to be really good at answering that question, what if we reduce the propensity for the question to be asked? And I think that puts pressure on the vendor community to say, well, what's the commercial model here? Because if, it's like the tension between contact centers that are being paid to provide bodies, and knowing that sometimes the right thing to do for the customer experience is to allow a self-service capability. That creates tension with the BPO relationships that some of these leading brands have. And as we get into more and more of those customer experiences being automated, if you're charging people to resolve things, then there's no incentive to reduce the likelihood of something needing to be resolved. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the long run.
I think the BPO model is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because you have lots of really big companies that have been basically outsourced contact centers for a long period of time, where you can't really, for the business, you don't really control the customer experience because it may be in a completely different country to you. You don't know who your agents are. You don't really know the conditions that those workers are actually working in, to be perfectly honest. You don't really know what their wages are and stuff like that. And so a lot of those BPO kind of organizations that charge for bums on seats, essentially, I think are in a real kind of, have the real potential to be completely disrupted, because if I'm a brand and I've got X millions of dollars per year shelled out on this operation here, where I don't have any control over the customer experience, and I can just do the same thing with conversational AI, the long-term picture potentially, Taryn, for those kind of organizations is quite challenging.
Yeah, and I think, so like I said, what we're doing is digital humans. So how can you put a persona, a brand ambassador on the conversational AI? So you're right, it will potentially have implications there, cost savings for the enterprise, and then leveraging all the new tech that's coming out with conversational AI. So how do we, make sure that we have an interface that's tried and true, the face, right, and have the right empathy and interactions with folks to delight the customers. We'll be able to do that without having those business models move forward.
Yeah, and I think especially with the Ericsson digital assistant, right? It looks more human. The AI, conversational AI, is behind it, driving it, and the humans is the persona interface. As it looks and feels more human in the interaction, our expectations are going to go up, because now we're getting used to the fact that it's going to understand what we say and not ask us to repeat it 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. And as the expectations go up, right, the near human interaction needs to be more human-like. So I think, Kevin, you brought up one time, we say things when we're answering a question that really we're saying more than what's in the individual words. Like, I can't do it on Tuesday. Wednesdays are better when I have more time. And the digital human should be able to understand, oh, maybe they're off Wednesday, and infer more things about what was said.
Well, and I hope those digital humans have a better memory than I do. Right? It's a great example of how these things can add a lot of value in concert with human interactions rather than completely automating them.
I do like that example, that sort of implicit personalization. There's also the somewhat explicit personalization too, what you already know about the person, and that the more information you know about someone, the context, and doing that level of personalization, the less questions you have to ask them. Like if you call the airline, if I was to call the airline right now, it's going to know who I am. I'm going to ask if I'm calling about my flight to San Francisco tomorrow. It already knows those things, and it's sort of anticipating what you might be asking about. So that's another area where folks are advancing more too.
Yeah, exactly. Personal experience, going through Dallas, Fort Worth. My flight, connecting flight, I get there and all of a sudden it's delayed 2 hours. What's the first thing I want to do? I know there's more than one flight going to where I'm going, so where else? I'd love it to be able to just go into the app or call and say, hey, I want to change flight, but have them say, hi, Tim, I see your flight was canceled. Are you looking to find a different one to get home earlier? And have that known already, because I'm supposed to be at that level of flying so much that I'm, in a
Tier.
Yeah, tier. So that would be great, but we haven't gotten there yet. But we can. It's just a matter of tying the data to what's actually happening right now for that person that's calling.
Yeah, there was one other thing I want to note, which is interesting. Those using digital humans today, people actually have more forgiveness if they need to repeat themselves. So today, if I have to repeat, it's like, escalate, get me out of this chat bot. Like, I don't want to have to repeat it. If you have a digital human interface, they're actually more forgiving, will stay on the line longer and repeat a few more times and have higher satisfaction after the call ends. So there's some piece to that today.
I saw somewhere that digital humans can actually be, either 50% or twice as effective in terms of getting people from one side to the other side of a conversation. So a higher success rate having a digital human there. Have you experienced something similar?
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I'll say, at least for us, it's not, we don't make the brain and the AI, that's everyone out here and the partners, right? So it's interesting because it's just changing the interface, and then it has people are stickier and more engaged. So it's just, I think, an interesting thing about human psychology and the user experience overall.
Which is a really important part of this, right? I think it was, I might get the brand wrong, but I think it was Waymo, when they were introducing their self-driving cars in, I think it was Arizona. They did a study, and the people who were exiting the car, and nobody else was in it, there was no driver, as they were getting out, they would kind of look up towards the front and say, thank you, kind of in a, just because that's what we're used to doing. So it's funny how even though they're clearly capable of knowing there's nobody there, they still feel this psychological pressure or a habit or some sort of muscle memory to say thank you.
That used to, so in the analytics, we used to see that all the time on, not on Alexa because you didn't get the raw utterance, but for Google Actions, you'd see people thanking the experience after it gave some sort of answer. And I find it too, like if I ask for the weather and it gives it to them, and I say thanks. Just something.
You can't help but anthropomorphize these things, can you, sometimes, when it's a voice that you hear, you know, you what is it, it's, I can't remember the Wired for Speech, who was it that wrote Wired for Speech? Anybody remember? Wired for Speech? Clifford Nass, yes, thank you, that's it. Clifford Nass, that was basically what the whole book was about, is how that when you hear a voice, you can't help but associate human tendencies to it. And just by hearing one voice, you can assume gender, you can assume location, where this person's from, like broadly speaking, how educated they are, how old they are. Then you can start to build up a picture about whether, you know, is this somebody who you might trust? Is it not? Are they in a good mood? Are they in a bad mood? You know, and so maybe that's part of also what the future of conversational AI may be holding. We're seeing a lot of advances in synthetic voices, you know, and sounding a lot more human. The example we saw earlier on from Poly AI was sounded like a recorded voice to me. It may well have been, I don't know, but it sounded really impressive. So where are we heading from the synthetic voice standpoint?
Maybe this isn't quite answering that, but I think chatbots and voice assistants give you an opportunity to reinforce your brand. Creating some form of personality. That was something we saw in the data too. Like the chatbots that had some form of personality had higher engagement than those that didn't. But you can overdo it. You have to be careful. That's why a lot of the folks realize that sometimes they're hiring former screenwriters for conversation designers, just knowing that timing. There's a popular banking app. If I was asked what's the weather inside the banking app, it'll say it's always sunny when you're talking about your finances. Like it adds a bit of personality. But if you were to think of like you know, the colors red and yellow, you'd probably associate that with McDonald's or something. But how do you translate that into like these voice experiences that creating that same personality for your brand, whether it's IVR or text-based chatbot?
Interesting. And I suppose that's amplified when you add a human in front of it, because you know, not only does it sound like a human, it looks like a human, and so, you know, the potential for that kind of like, I suppose, brand engagement kind of uplift is there, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll quickly comment to that. It definitely that's there, and I think when we're talking about the future and the evolution, right, we have Web 2, and that is mobile apps, you know, chat bots interface as we're moving towards Web 3. So I'm getting very futuristic here, and what will happen in the metaverse, then that also gets very interesting, right? What those avatars will be like, how brands will engage in the metaverse. And now that's not here now, but will be in the future, and I think that'll continue to be important and someday get to a place where it can be your voice, right, as the agent or whoever it is behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think, we'll get to more, or hyper-personalization will become more and more personal, so that as the digital human looks more like whatever demographic or culture that you're serving, the AI engines behind it will be more specialized. You know, when I first started in 2017, it was the going thought was, those who have the most data will have the best AI engines. Well, that was, you know, AWS, it was Google, it was Microsoft, and it was IBM. And they will always have great engines, but you're going to see niche AI elements or engines emerge because they will be in that specific area, say the vernacular for clinical visits, or something that some industry that has its own lingo, and will be better at understanding it, processing it, and then speaking back that lingo through maybe a specialized TTS engine or a language model.
And recognizing, so if it's difficult to predict who's going to be the best cognitive vendor, which it is, and if there is no single best player for all things, right? They all have their own strengths in language and dialects and domains and these types of things. Then architecturally it makes sense to place a bet on an open system. And as we look at the future and these large language models coming online now that are performing at an incredible level above and beyond the traditional models, then if you were an artist in this space, you would realize that these are different colors that you can now paint with, and that not everybody's going to have the same taste in painting. So if, for example, if someone's calling in for the third time to reset their password yet again, we don't need to have an engine tell us that they're unhappy, right? We know that contextually because it's their third call. Maybe speaking and engaging with that person in a particular tone is going to be very effective. That somebody else might be calling at the exact same time and it's their first time interacting with your brand. You might want to use a different voice. You might want to use different language, different levels of formality. You might not want to creep them out by being as personal with them yet because you're building a relationship, whereas a more tenured customer will appreciate that you remember who they are. And so the future is really one where all of these technical complexities are starting to disappear, right? And now it's really a race of how do we use these things in the most effective and helpful ways, and that's going to create an entire wave of opportunity for people who want to get in the driver's seat and paint with these colors to drive business performance that hasn't been unlocked before.
It's interesting. You kind of reminded me there of Whisper on the speech recognition side, being able to, once that reaches to, and those, there's plenty of other speech recognition companies that are doing good stuff, being able to plug in the right kind of components for the right kind of use case and stuff like that. I remember seeing, can't remember who it was now, I read something a long time ago which was about how the future of conversational AI is around also being able to adapt to the personality of the person talking. So in your example there, Kevin, you were talking about, someone calls back, it's a third time, they're probably going to be pissed off. You might want to kind of treat that sensitively. First time caller, maybe a slightly different situation, but also different people have different personalities. And so I might be a kind of person who just likes the facts, straight and simple. Somebody else might be the kind of person that needs a bit more detail, likes things to be explained in more detail. And so being able to adapt the conversation based on people's kind of communication preferences, is that where we're heading? Is that too complex? Is it needed or not?
Oh, it's absolutely where we're heading. And this idea that people know their preferences is also worth challenging. I might fill out a form or check a box to say, please text me. But if it's urgent and I don't respond to your text, I would very much appreciate a call. And so even relying on what someone indicates as their preference might not be particularly helpful. But it goes back to what machines are great at, recognizing patterns in these types of things. To say, statistically speaking, this profile of person is going to be most responsive to this call to action if we do these things at this time of day, at this cadence, with this escalation strategy. And that's getting us well beyond just which NLU engine to use, right? This is getting into the more creative side of the business. And it seems that a lot of the technologies that are, truly impressive have also made it really easy to build bad experiences, right?
And we're almost trapped in those these days, aren't we, from 15 years ago when they were designed?
Yeah, so now it's, it used to be like, wow, you had to know a lot of esoteric technology to build an IVR. You had to be a telephony expert. You had to be certified by whatever, Cisco or Avaya. That bar has been lowered to nothing. Anyone can now build a full omni-channel solution. It doesn't mean they know how to do it. So there's going to be some interesting evolutions, I think, in terms of the quality of experiences, but eventually there will be enough critical mass of people who are excited to use these capabilities to set an example and be a role model. And there's going to be some company out there, might be Ant Financial, that has just completely dominated their industry because they got this stuff right. And as that starts to happen more frequently, the lead that the organizations take by getting this right is going to be so hard for their competition to catch up to that in some ways it feels like an arms race.
It can be exponential, can't it? I think, especially if you can, like as you said, 5 years, even 5 years ago, for those of you that kind of like, were involved in building Alexa skills and things like that, like 5 years ago, it was all command line stuff, and you had to learn how to, had to know how to code to build anything. Whereas now, not just with the voice assistants, but any call center application, conversational-wise, can be built by low-code tools. You don't have to know how to code whatsoever. As long as you're creative and you understand how to put a conversation together, it can be built by almost anybody, really. I suppose the quality is an issue because we're in like a WordPress kind of phase where when WordPress was released, the amount of terrible websites that were knocked up and terrible blogs that came to light, But within that, you find the drum and whatever it is, Mashable and SEO modes and all these really fantastic things come out of being able to democratize the technology. But there's a quality kind of issue there, isn't there?
Yeah, I definitely think the quality, because as much as the low-code, no-code tools do make it easier to build these things, it does help to have the domain expertise around effective conversation designs and flows. Like building a blog, I could just regurgitate all sorts of content on the page and keep going. Eventually I'm going to touch upon something somebody cares about. And then when you go to mobile app, I still have a decent amount of real estate to do that. But once you start getting into the chat and voice experiences, you have to really be clear, concise, succinct, the unambiguous. You have to take into account things like empathy, inclusion, all that kind of stuff to do a proper experience. Because it's not just about building something that understands the user and responds appropriately, but responds in a way that actually satisfies the user. Go back to the beginning. Customer experience.
And I think this is a really good opportunity to actually go back and reset a bit, because we're still using the customer journey models that we set up a while back. Okay, press this for that, press that. Okay, now you can speak, but it's still the same basic menu. And when I call and I get, okay, if it's about X, Y, or Z, 1. If it's about this, 2, and I keep waiting. No, it's not that, it's not that. Well, it wasn't any of them. I think it might have been 1 or 2, but I don't remember what that was. So you go back through it again. You can now redesign the entire customer journey to include what's now available with back-end database integrations or anything related to the customer journey that is, in the end, going to make that user feel like, man, that was nice. I like that. I just got it done really quickly.
It's also about allowing, like, in those kind of cases, the IVR, like we see this in partners say, I do IVR and it's press 1 for this, 2 for that. Like, but that's not really conversational AI. The folks aren't speaking. And we just ran a survey. We're going to show some of the data tomorrow, where it was fascinating. 83% of the users, at least the respondents to the survey, they wanted the ability to be able to speak freely in free-form voice in a voice environment, and they wanted the ability to type free-form text in the text environment. So even though we have some of these menu options, still want to give them an option to speak more freely. But one thing I found interesting about the numbered systems, I was on a panel once where the folks were talking, the reason why it's the numbered, and part of it is like the order is the things that happen more often, but it was built around the back-end systems. So it's how the systems work rather than necessarily what you wanted as a user or how you would talk. And the example they gave was, like, imagine that someone calls up a Comcast or their ISP, and they say, my internet's not working. They pick the option, the internet's not working. So that immediately routes them to tech support. But if they knew the person, they made use of context and personalization and realized, oh, this particular person hasn't paid their bill, and that's why the internet's no longer working, and they should have routed them to billing instead. So that's kind of interesting. It's a different one. Not necessarily tying it to the back-end systems.
Absolutely. Has anyone got any questions for our panel? Feel free. Yeah, got one question down here.
Sure. Thank you.
No worries.
I'm hoping we can unpack a little this term, digital human, because I don't know, I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable with that term. Because the word human, like, includes a lot of things, like you are, your history, and just like person. Yeah, and I just don't know yet how can these two words really live peacefully together, because
Yeah,
what kind of entity is it?
Yeah.
exactly.
Who's responsible for
And
it?
what are the ethics behind it?
Exactly. Is it connected to a person? Does that digital human live forever after that person passes away?
Yeah.
Various
No.
other questions, ethical questions, exactly.
Understood. Yes. So I'll start with, we did not coin the term digital human, so can't speak to all of that. But really, when we say it, what we mean is our 3D mesh photoreal avatars, right? So the way that we're building them, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. So we have a volumetric capture studio in LA. We hire actors. We're building a huge database, and then training AI machine learning algorithms to then create these digital humans, so the likeness of humans, right? We focus on the look and feel of them so that they're photoreal, and then the animation, right? So how they react and are driven by text-to-speech or voice, and then connect in the back end. We don't create the conversational AI NLU behind it. We partner to do that. But yeah, it's a new technology coming out, so I understood, should they be called digital avatars? And then some of that, is let go a little bit. Right. So I don't have the answer to all of them, but I can at least let you know when we talk about it that is what they are, 3D photoreal avatars, right? That then can have that human interface with you. But a lot of questions to be answered still, and then. Again, who owns it, or do you make it the likeness of the human and not the actual human? As we evolve, really, the reason we're creating it that way is because our end goal is 3D presence. You Face ID scan yourself, you have a 3D model of yourself, and then you have AR, VR glasses, and you can have a conversation with someone in a different place, right? So that's what we're building towards, and then you would own that. It would be your, in other words, like digital twin of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for the panel?
Oh, come on, I know they're out there.
I know. No more questions about the future of conversational AI. We're pretty sound then. We know what it's all about. We didn't mention large language models. I don't think we'll have that much time, but we've got 1 minute left. Any thoughts on where large language models are headed? We can't really have a future of conversational AI panel without mentioning large language models, can we?
I like how folks, actually, Kevin can probably speak to this more, is how some folks are making use of it for building out additional training phrases. When you're building your intent model, you can use the large language model for that, or you could potentially even use it, and I think perhaps you can touch more upon this, is instead of hitting a fallback, using it to perhaps expand what the person could have been saying and see if that matches on the NLU. So some of that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's some really practical uses today, but they do require additional capabilities before you can release them into the wild. So they're not reliable in production alone, but already nailed it. If somebody offers an utterance that maybe your system doesn't understand, you can use the LLM to create additional utterances, process all of those to see what intent might be revealed, and then say, I think you're asking about X, Y, and Z. So that's a great kind of current state of using these things. Certainly in the future, though, based on what we're seeing in the market right now, they're worth the hype. They're going to completely change how we all think about conversational AI as an interface, and it's going to create a really interesting career opportunity for people who learn to design using these new skills.
Interesting. Wow. Thank you so much. We'll end on that. Well done. Thank you very much, Kevin, Artie, Taryn, and Tim. Appreciate it. And please, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Kane.